clan. So my nation is Mohawk. I'm actually an Upper Mohawk. I'm Bear Clan. I'm from the House of Jeeks from Six Nations of the Grand River Territory. But what Skenongo means is it's actually a question. Are you carrying the great peace? And when we ask that question, we're actually wishing that for you. And if you're carrying the great peace, you have a good mind, a good heart, and you're doing very well. So for the people that I'm meeting for the first time, Skenongo, and actually the second goal is actually with additional respect. And then once we're connected, which we are now, and then we would just say Sego. So Sego Sheila. And if I wanted to know how she was doing, I would also say Sadaka Lite. So how are you doing, or are you well? So that would be our formal greetings, and then our familiar greetings. And just a quick aside as well that we're going to become all connected by having the conversation this evening. And so at the end, in our language, we don't say goodbye. We just say until we see each other again, until we meet again. And most Indigenous communities, that's languages, that's pretty much the same as well. That it doesn't conceptualize as goodbye. Other thing, I suppose that's up on the slide too, is that one of the main things that I do is I work for Sport for Life. I'm contracted. My title is I'm lead mentor for Indigenous projects. Really, the main project that I work on is in Nunavut. I'm working physical literacy Indigenous communities in the north. I'm a retired secondary school teacher, and then I'm also a past competitive athlete, I guess, at this point, although I suppose I could go into the Masters games, all the sports that I would be involved in. Over the years, hockey was my biggest one, and from the coaching perspective, basketball was one of my biggest at one point. Coached for Canada at World Championships on the women's side with the U19s. And but badminton is the very first thing that I coached. I still coach that now. And then also field hockey is also probably my biggest sport that I coach right now. So Nyawagoa, thank you for listening, and hand it over to Kurt.
Okay, I'm Kurt Smecher. I'm captain of the hunt for Métis on Vancouver Island. It's a land-based knowledge keeper role for land-based skills and culture. My family is from Red River. It's Delorum, Short, Ross, from Batoche. It's Thibault. So my families were involved in both uprisings with the Métis. With archery and rifle and pistol shooting, I'm comp dev trained, and I've run mostly Indigenous clubs. We'd also so when we were putting this together, we talked about this being pretty much a conversation with you guys. So we'd like to know a little bit about you, who you are, why you're here, what your background is. So if we can just go around and have you tell us. Let's start with Kelly. You were here first.
Oh, well, that's a good reason to pick on me. Okay, I'm from Ontario. I am on the Archery Canada's coaching committee. I'm a national judge candidate. I've competed for about 15 years, not well, but I have competed. Comp Dev certified for archery. I'm mainly here because our club is really getting active. And I'd like to just learn how we can be more attentive to everyone's needs.
Okay. Sheila?
I'm Sheila Madabi. I'm from Wicklow-Macomb, Ontario. Currently working in Whitehorse, Yukon. I'm an archery coach. I'm certified intermediate, currently working on my comp dev. I was apprentice coach at the Canada Winter Games for archery, and I will be the coach for the NAG team in July.
Good. We will see you there. Mitch.
Hello, everybody. Can you guys hear me right? Okay. My name is Mitchell Isaac. I'm from the Listicus First Nation in Quebec. I am beginner archery certified. I too will also be going to NAG because I'm the head coach of the U19 male softball team for EDN. Other backgrounds that I have, I just recently did my second year of being an assistant coach for EDN at the National Aboriginal Hockey Championship. And I currently run a Indigenous archery club in my community. I also collaborate with the archery club that is just a bridge away because my community is just a 2-minute drive from the province of New Brunswick. And just doing a lot of collaboration with surrounding clubs. My competitive background, I've been competing for the past 4 years. You know, and I've had some success in some competitions and some in not so much in others. I'm actually going to be going to Canada Cup East in a couple weeks, so I'm going to be doing that and having fun with that. Other than that, just the fact that it's an Indigenous topic in the sport of archery is what really caught my attention, and I even encouraged a lot of my current archers that I coach and even some of the Indigenous guys I compete with to encourage them to come in, but unfortunately they chose not to, but it was still, the option was there for them. But I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to get as much knowledge from everybody, and I'm hoping that I can provide knowledge for you guys as well. And yeah, I'm just happy to be here.
Good. Thank you. And Melissa.
Yeah, my name is Melissa. I'm from Alberta. I'm the team manager for the NAG archery 3D archery team this year. So see you guys all there. Very, very excited. It's getting so close. Be here before we know it. I'm also the coordinator this year for the Alberta Indigenous Games 3D archery event, which, just a little plug, Alberta Indigenous Games does accept Indigenous archers outside of Alberta to compete as well. So if any provinces, or you know of any provinces that want to come down and compete as well, yeah, that's a great opportunity. I'm just starting my coaching, and Anne has convinced me, and my club has convinced me to do the judges pre-test as well. So that's gonna fill up a lot of my extra time. I got into archery. My daughter, Madison Minks, she started off in the NASP program, for the in-school program. And now she's been shooting for 7 years, and she got into the competitive archery through the Alberta Winter Games and AIG, and now she's on the NAG team as well. So she's really, really doing well, and she got me involved in archery, and I just love it. It's great, and we want to really focus on trying to introduce more Indigenous athletes. It's a Indigenous, you know, traditionally Indigenous sport, and yeah, we definitely need more Indigenous athletes shooting in archery clubs. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
I'll just put the slides up here 1 second, everybody, and then Greg and Kurt will keep going.
So when we were talking about putting this together, we weren't really sure who was going to show up and what people's experiences were. It sounds like, you know, the experience in the room here is quite extensive. There's a lot of different backgrounds, and so what I'd like to do is I'd like to see this be very much a discussion, and we'd put it together with very much a view towards you know, coaches and clubs and how to interact with Indigenous athletes, how to work with them. I think a lot of you know a lot about that. You're spread all over Canada, so please contribute to this, and let's expand the discussion to how we can expand archery generally throughout Canada into the communities, how we get more than 4 coaches to come and talk about this and join up as well. So Greg, you want to give us a start?
Yeah, one of the things that we were talking about when we were, again, brainstorming about what we needed to discuss this evening, and if you're looking up on the slide, one of the things we came up with was the key is to work with communities. I'll start with a story. So being from Six Nations, the Grand River Territory, we have a neighbor, Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, which is an Anishinaabe community territory as well. It's much smaller than Six Nations actually, so it ends up sometimes getting lost because our shadow is so big here at Six Nations. But they have their Three Fires powwow every August, and last summer, the chief from Mississaugas, Stacy Laforme, and he's actually a gentleman that I grew up with and went to high school or elementary school and high school with as well. And he's chief now, and he made some comments about to the one of the local newspapers about the powwow. And so after the powwow, he had said, they asked him, they said, well, what were your thoughts on the attendance? And he said, well, everyone is welcome to come. He said, it's not just, the powwow is not just for Indigenous people, it's for all people. First of all, it's, all are welcome. He said, but the one thing that was a little bit discouraging for him was that there were a lot of people who actually came up to him during the powwow and said, I'm really interested in helping your community. So, I really wanted to have a conversation with you to ask, what can we do for you? What can we do for you? And Stacy's response was, well, you're really kind of not asking a good question when you say, what can we do for you? Because of the fact that still creates, or that perpetuates a mindset that we need help. Yes, we do, but we need help that's collaborative help, not kind of, you're not able to do it for yourself, or you're not able at all, which has historically been, and I don't think that was the intent of the people, but I think there does need to be this change in attitude or change in mentality about, when we're approaching Indigenous communities, how and what's the reason we're doing that? What's the reason we're approaching Indigenous communities? Well, because we want to collaborate, because we want to work together, not because we want to come in and necessarily help. And I think there are, I've actually encountered a lot of organizations that say, well, this is what we can do for you. And I also think that's a business mindset. But Stacy had said to them, he said, his quote, and I've used it quite often now when I do presentations, is that, you're, instead of asking what we can do for you, you should be asking, how do we work together? And so I think that first bullet, I just wanted to illustrate that with a story, which is what I do. And Sheila probably knows that I will spin yarns forever sometimes and with the stories, but I also do think that it's a key thing to discuss, is that, so then how do we promote working together rather than saying, okay, you're going to come in and do this for us, which I think also, a lot of people in our territories, because of the history, that we have become a little bit dependent on outside programs coming in and doing things for us. So that's kind of my 2 cents worth there. And the rest of the bullets, I think, support that concept as well. How can we work together to build great programs? And instead of having them adapt to your programs or the programs that you're going to bring in, like, again, we can do this for you. It should be the idea that, okay, we have these resources, but we need to hear what you do need so that we can work together on this. And maybe we go off in the direction that we hadn't even thought about before. And I think that's a key thing too, as well. So that they're listening rather than just coming in with a prepackaged, preconceived idea that they think is going to work, and that's what they need to actually just ask some questions, as opposed to coming in and thinking that they've got it all created.
Yeah, so when we were putting this together, that first sentence, it was very purposeful in the width rather than the for. So in my day job, I'm a doctor. I work a lot with the cultural safety side of medicine in BC. And there's this sense of needing to come in and rescue and needing to come in and provide for, and that's the basic theme I think that we're looking at this evening is working with what do the communities need, what do the athletes need, and providing that, and not just putting up a poster that says we have a club that runs every Tuesday night, and kind of hope someone wants to come and join us. It's that co-creation that's so important.
So at this point, thoughts and comments. Maybe we need to voluntold rather than hoping for volunteers. Sheila, what are your thoughts? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Of course, you're going to put me on the spot.
Yeah.
Just trying to read all those things and think about everything I've done at home in communities where I've taught archery and that, and then even up here when we go to communities and we do archery there, there's kind of the same, kind of different. Because at home, when I do archery, it's me going to organization hiring me to come in and just do archery with the kids. And then here it's like we're going to community schools to do the phys ed portion of their day. So just kind of trying to see both sides of that. And I just do what I just do naturally, what comes to me on how to deliver it. So it's, for me, it's more of making sure that they can shoot safely is the first thing, and then just kind of helping them as they go instead of, okay, this is what I need you to do, this is how you're going to do it, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, okay, here's why we're going to be safe, and here's the bow, here's kind of how I want you to shoot it. And then as they start shooting, then I'll try and help them, correct them as they go, so that they don't feel like they're doing it wrong or that I'm singling anybody out. So it's just kind of working with them as we go further down the line.
Yeah. So when I started coaching, most of the events for the Aboriginal communities that I saw were what I consider to be episodic. We would be invited in. We would do the first lesson and go away. And another 6 months or a year later, we'd come in. We do the first lesson, go away. Another 6 months to a year later, we'd come in. We do the first lesson and go away. And we had these episodic introductions to archery, but there was never the ability to develop skills to gain all of the benefits that we gain from having a continuous program. And so a lot of what I did in my clubs was trying to create that continuous program that the kids could come to and experience. And I think there's a difference in the approach. When you're invited in for one time, you just kind of parachute in, you do your thing. But I think when you're trying to develop a continuous program, that's where we really need to work with the communities and understand the communities a little better. Melissa, what's your experience?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with pretty much everything that was said here. The continuing training, I think, is very important. You can't get, it's like a piano lesson, you get one piano lesson, and then here's a whole bunch of music, you know, come back in a year, hopefully you're a pro. You know, they'll lose in, especially the youth, they'll lose interest really fast. And you know, and knowing the different, I found with my daughter and myself, is knowing the where archery can evolve into, like for the competitions and stuff. Like when we first started, when my daughter first started, it was just in the in-school NASP program, which I think, I'm not sure how big, I know NASP is quite big in Alberta, and more in the Western Canada. I'm not sure if any of the other coaches have heard of the in-school program at all. But it's an amazing program. It's runs like pretty much all school season right in school, and they really get the experience and the competition and coaching and everything, and really involved. But to take it from there to know where it can grow into in other competitions and NAG, like these great opportunities that you know, give an athlete that goal to reach. You know, yeah, definitely it's all fun. You have to be fun as well, but I always find to have that little bit of competition and that push to keep going is what keeps a lot of the athletes coming back and striving to become better.
So Melissa, how do you grow your program from an in-school program, from a phys ed based program into the community? Have you tried to do that with your program at all?
Well, so are you referring to like the NASP program I was talking about?
Well, just any archery program. The NASP is very specific, but if we wanted to bring just archery into some of the communities, how does that transition from school go? School's a nice introduction, but how do you move beyond that into the communities?
I guess that's where I would think where the clubs and stuff would come out as well. You know, if there's that, I guess, a coalition between the communities, the clubs, Archery Canada, and the provincial collaborate, like Alberta Archery, you know, all working together and sharing the information, sharing events, trying to, you know, combine all the resources to show all the different opportunities and stuff out there, I guess.
Okay. And Mitch, what's your experience with this?
Usually so just to kind of give, I got booted out of the Zoom just out of nowhere, and I tried coming back in, so I missed like a little bit of the beginning of this. But just to kind of get a gist on my experience with the clubs, they do have the NAS program in the province of New Brunswick, and we don't have it in the local schools in Listugush. But what I did so what I do for work is that I work at a women's shelter, and I work with the men's side of domestic events. And I kind of took archery and used it as a way of a coping mechanism for men. Whereas, you know, I'm sure a lot of the men in this room could agree that when we're playing sport or we're in a dressing room, you know, we tend to open up, and we tend to be a little bit more vulnerable amongst men during sport than we would do outside. And I ended up using archery as a way for men to come out and communicate together through sport, through cultural sport. And then all of a sudden it became that these fathers were bringing their kids to my archery activities for work. And then kids started showing up, and it just started slowly getting bigger and bigger. And then I ended up having like a group of 5 where I had me, my son, I had another friend of mine and his kid, and it was one little one that I was coaching. He was 8 years old when he started, and we traveled together to tournaments all over the place, and that kind of got popular. And so now it's getting even bigger, and now it's getting to a point where I have a roster of 22 archers just from my community that I could pick from to go to the Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Summer Games, which is going to be happening at the end of August. So that's just kind of like the backstory on how Listugush Archery Club started. And it just kind of started off as a activity for men to help with their coping, and it just kind of grew into a very well-known club in the Gaspé region of Quebec and also all over New Brunswick.
So how did you enter into the community? Yeah, I understand you were working in the women's shelter, but how did you introduce the idea of an archery club into the community and get buy-in?
It was just something that I didn't necessarily introduce it. It just kind of first started off as a activity amongst the clientele that I had. And then, I ended up doing it in the center of Listugush. So everybody's seen what I was doing. They might not have heard about it, but they seen me do it. And it just got to a point where I purchased all the equipment from Archery Canada online. And it just got to a point where each session that I had, more and more people showed up and more people were interested in it. And I was able to have the opportunity to instruct a lot of these because I had some men and women who were up to the age of 60 all the way down to the age of 7 that were approaching me and just wanting to know, like, what's archery all about and how does it work? Can you teach me? And again, like I said, the 22, 23 archers that are in Listugush that are competition ready, all started off like that. Like it was either one at a time, or sometimes they came in a big group and they just kind of wanted to try it. And then after trying it, and then after seeing the success of me and a couple of other community members going to various tournaments, like we went to go into provincials and going to Atlantics, and then we're planning on going to the Eastern Canadian Crown, which is another major 3D competition in Nova Scotia. And then with the Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Summer Games, I brought a group last year, a group of five athletes between the ages of 9 and 16, and they all came back with medals from that. So just seeing that sort of achievement from the younger group, and then also seeing that sort of achievement from my older group has just kind of, I wouldn't want to say spark, I want to say ignited archery into the community of Listugush.
So when you grew from 5 up into 20 plus, did you advertise, or how did that happen?
It was something that I did a lot through social media. I ended up creating a Facebook page called the Listugush Archery Club, if you guys are ever interested in looking that up. And I just kind of posted a lot of the achievements from the younger group and also the older group. I always posted online when the sessions were. Like I was supposed to start this week with 3D archery in the community, but we have a bit of a rain spell going on. So I was unable to get it started this week, but I am going to start it next Tuesday. And that is something on where the morning of I would post on the Facebook page, outdoor 3D archery at the local school from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. And I would do that, and whoever shows up kind of shows up. Like as of now, I have a core group that attends, but then I have more so others that message me on Facebook directly, just asking about it and just being curious about it. And what also was a big hit for me, especially with the younger group and the older group, is using 3D animals. Whereas when I first started, I was just using target butts and just, 40 centimeter targets. But then just the thrill of shooting a 3D animal out in the elements, whether it's hot out, the sun is out, and just kind of practicing their traditional rights as traditional right to hunt and to practice that. And and a lot of kids don't realize it, but the older group does, on where when you shoot 3D and you're hitting that animal in the vital at a certain distance, that's prepping you if you ever wanted to go hunting and actually hunt that specific animal or any animal in general, where you would know where the vital is. It's always in the back of the front shoulder all the time, and you would understand your distance depending on the bow you're using. So using 3D animals was something that really gravitated archery and the interest of the sport in my community.
And what percentage of your archers are Indigenous?
All of them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because the Zoe, can we just get the next slide? I think the other one's burned into our eyeballs. The I think one of the themes that Greg and I have talked about is that each community is very different. The one size never fits all, and that back to that co-creation, that you need to know your community, you need to work with the community to develop what they need. And I think a lot of the successes that I've seen in the Indigenous communities is almost entirely relationship based. And Mitch, it sounds like that's a lot of what's going on with your club, is that you've created these relationships, and the club is growing and thriving based on that. Is that a fair statement?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Mitch, I'm also interested in the number of returnees. Like, once you have people come out for the first time, like you mentioned that there was a lot of curiosity. Do you have any, like, I hate that I'm saying this, but do you have any stats, or were you keeping track to see whether a lot of people tried and then come back, or whether there's a lot of people came out and came back?
There was a couple of them that kind of came in and out. Whereas, because in Listugush, we have a lot of summer programs. So we have some kids that are a little occupied with other sports during that time. But I have a core 10 that come all the time. Others kind of have their own spots in the community that they shoot out of. And but in regards to stats, I don't know. It's kind of hard to say, because, like I said, like a lot of the youth have multiple sports going on at the same time. So, and 1 week they'll show up on a Tuesday, and then next week they'll show up on a Thursday. So there's that consistency on where they come, just not every session.
Yeah. No, I'm probably just looking at the fact that there's some that never came back. So even if they're coming, once a week rather than, even though you're providing twice, I would consider that a huge win. One of the things that maybe you missed when you were offline there was Sheila talked about the idea of her instruction style. And I think when we talk about, how do we have to engage, or how are we going to try and approach, there's one thing about building the relationship and getting the message out there. And you've mentioned your social media, but I also think once you get them there, do they come back? And so then I think that's related to the idea of what's your activity style. So when I mean that, when I say that, the activity style, and you're saying you run your activity, I suppose what I would really be interested in hearing is, and this again, Sheila talked about this as well, rather than having a very structured, this is the step by step process, and I'm going to run you through. I would guess, but I still want to hear it, is that you're probably far more practical right away, and then as they progress, they need to get some instruction rather than having a very structured instructional plan right from the beginning? Would that be fair or true?
Well, what I usually do is that I don't usually put in structure right off the bat, because especially with it actually works with both the younger and older group. It gets very intimidating, I guess is the word to say. Whereas when I kind of tell them the fundamentals of their feet position, shoulder position, always looking forward, also talking about the safety aspects of it, going through the whistle system, and just allowing them to just shoot and have fun at first. And then once they get the understanding of the safety, and once they get understanding of your foot placement, are you a squared up shooter, are you an offset, or are you an open? And then once they have that consistency on showing up, and then that's when I begin to work on the structure aspect of it, not as a group, but at one at a time. I work on one athlete at a time on working on their structure of it. But for the first bit of it, I usually just let them shoot to have fun. Whereas when I have my target butts out on the field, and and then I was like, the only thing that I would like all of you guys to work on is just hit the box. Don't worry about the paper target that's on it. Just hit the box. And then once you get a good understanding of the bow itself, then we'll start working on structure. So I think that was the one thing that allowed older groups and younger groups to come back, where it was just them shooting to have fun and then not necessarily shooting to compete right off the bat.
Okay.
So I think, Zoe, can we have next slide? I think that leads quite nicely into, one of the major themes that Greg and I had talked about, and that's about relationship first. That once you've built relationships, then you can start to work on skills, on some of the technical stuff. But the relationships with the athletes and with the communities are of prime importance. And I don't think that's true just of Indigenous communities. I think that's true much more generally, but I think it's a very, very important feature of our communities, that we look for those relationships. We look for that trust and safety. And Mitch, it sounds like that's very much what you've built in yours.
Yeah, especially the trust aspect of it. Whereas there was a lot of hesitation, especially from the older group that I instruct and coach. But then once that, again, giving that relationship, that opportunity to communicate while performing a physical activity is something that was really important. And the fact that a lot of these older groups that I have enjoyed it, and they're seeing a progression in their archery style. They're finding their own style, instead of just you're getting a new archer and you're gonna teach him to shoot just like me. And I was like, no, he's gonna shoot, find his own style, and then that way we're gonna work off the style that he wants to shoot like. So yeah, especially trust is a huge thing as well too.
And Sheila, I'm guessing things aren't very different up in the Yukon.
No, exactly what Mitch was describing is exactly how I do, like when I run my classes, whether it's in the class or we're in the schools. It's like however they want to shoot, that's how I'm going to let them shoot, and let them, because that's how they're comfortable shooting. So exactly everything that Mitch said is pretty much how I do my classes and stuff.
Yeah. Now, Mitch also talked about using the 3D animals, and I find that that really links into more of a cultural experience and a cultural discussion. What's your experience in the Yukon with that?
When we go to schools, we use the 3D animals, and when we go to communities, we use the 3D animals as well. But in our in my regular classes, we use the targets. And I also have a 3D class that I do as well. So
You find that same connection with the 3D?
it's a little bit of a mix, I find, with the Indigenous kids and the not Indigenous kids, because the Indigenous kids are more focused on like the hunting, or where you gotta shoot it to kill it, and the non ones just want to shoot it in the head or the horns or someplace where they think it's fun to shoot it. So
Okay, Melissa, we haven't heard from you for a while. What's your experience with this idea of relationships being primary and trust?
Oh yeah, 100%. I agree with that. And I find also with dealing with some of the Indigenous athletes in the communities, and I think it maybe because I'm not aware of any archery clubs in any of our First Nation communities that are close to me, which is one of the things I'd like to change for sure. But so it's actually trying to, getting that access on an ongoing basis, access to the equipment, access to the club. Sometimes I find you have to go as a coach, I guess a little bit more than you would for non-Indigenous athletes, maybe, like, trying to find transportation for them. I find you have to do a little bit more organizing or prodding, I guess, to get the more Indigenous athletes out to the club, which all goes into that connection, that community, and that trust as well, for sure.
Yeah, I think that also brings us back to working with the communities to understand what their needs, what the requirements are, what the barriers are for each of the communities.
Yeah, barriers, that's the word I was looking for sure. And with the 3D, even from a personal point of view on that, I find when you're looking at a target for a long time, you kind of lose focus of kind of the fun part and the experience of it. And so actually we experienced that. I coached some Girl Guides this weekend, and so the first hour we're all shooting at targets, and then everybody's starting to go whatever, and a couple kids would go sit down. Like, oh, okay, let's bring out some 3D targets, and then they're like, oh, and they all jumped up, and the excitement was there again, and you're learning a new skill, right? So you're shooting at the different distances, even like shooting at balloons, I guess, right? Anything.
Well, and that's why I buy balloons by the thousand, not by the tens.
Yeah. During COVID, trying to keep even my daughter interested. We had some really interesting things set up in the garage that, loops that swaying back and forth that she could try to shoot through, and, anything to keep the interest alive. So I think with the 3D, and there's so many different skills to be learned, and judging distances and everything, I think that keeps everybody entertained a bit more too.
Yeah, keeps the interest up, keeps some variety going. Yeah, so there's the main themes that Greg and I wanted to talk about was co-design with communities, dealing with the communities and not doing for them, about each community being very different, and how really, again, that co-design is so important because they are so different, and that focus on relationships, that the personal relationship, the trust, that's what builds a place that they feel safe to come to and will return to. So Greg's point there, Mitch, I think it was really important, that it's not just getting them there the first time, but keeping them coming. It sounds like you've done a wonderful job of that too. The other thing that we wanted to talk about was about just different resources, and this is something that's very, very different in each province. So here in BC, our Aboriginal Sports Circle is ISPARC, and they have a lot of resources, a lot of funding. They've got a very robust program, and I'm just wondering what your resources locally are, both provincial and local resources that you can bring to play to bring these athletes in. Why don't we start with Sheila, because you're part of the Aboriginal Sports Circle up there.
Yeah. So what I've learned is our Yukon Aboriginal Sports Circle has purchased equipment for various communities, and either for their community itself, or I think just for the communities, and whether they share that with their school or recreation center, that's up to them. So as far as I know, a lot of them do have equipment. So last weekend, 2 weekends ago, we went to Mayo to go do archery and Arctic sports at their 30th anniversary of self-governance. And they're like, yeah, we have equipment, we have bows, arrows, and they had some targets, but when I looked, they didn't have stands. But we traveled with all the equipment that we normally would travel with, just in case somebody doesn't have a net or they don't have arrows or whatever. So we have our equipment here, plus I know we bought equipment for communities, and then in terms of our archers, we've had to order online for their equipment. So Canada Archery Online in Toronto, and we do have one person up here who is a dealer through Golden Arrow in Saskatchewan. So we get some stuff through him, and usually we send them to Canada Archery Online.
And what help do you provide local clubs if they want to start up their own club?
I know because we have one person in Dawson City who wants to start a club, and I think we have a form for them to fill out, and then because we're the governing body for archery here, that our director will just approve it or not, and then figure out what they need to in terms of equipment, what they might need.
And is there financial help for them?
Sometimes I think there is.
Okay.
Depending on budgets and that. So.
Yeah, because what I found in BC is whether they go through ISPARC or not, it seems to be fairly straightforward for them to do some fundraising and buy equipment, and also that the indoor range space, things like that, doesn't really tend to be much of a problem. The communities really do come with a lot of resource if they want to apply it. Melissa, your experience in Alberta on resources and tying into those resources?
I'm just getting involved with the team organization and organizing of coordinating different things. Here we have the Alberta Indigenous Sports Council, which is very active in all sports. We've and they also they used to host the Alberta, and and there's also the Alberta Indigenous Games. And they're their own division as well. And I'm hoping that they're looking at buying some archery equipment and everything too, to help with their event, to get more people to come out and sign up for that yearly thing, yearly event. So that's, I think, going to help, you know, some of the kids cross the barrier, so they have that equipment, that safe equipment to shoot with. We had a couple last year, some athletes that you know, show up for the games, and you know, they had their old Muslim's bow that might have been dry fired 10 times. You know, but it's like, okay, let's try to find you something safer to shoot with, that's within your poundage, and so they're not trying to pull a 40-50 pound bow as well. So there's the Alberta Sports Council, just Sports Council, the Alberta Indigenous Games, and a lot of the communities in Alberta, I find, do have resources available and programs for equipment. And like, I know from my husband are from the Enoch First Nation, Cree Nation, and they have a program that every youth has a certain amount of dollars available that they could claim to go towards any extracurricular activities. So that really helps out as well. And I'm finding that there's like, and for facilities and stuff, I definitely agree with that too, with the resources available there. Most of the first communities, they have a rec area that you can go and buy a backdrop curtain for, or you know, school gymnasiums and stuff that we could set up a club there for once a week or something like that to get a league going.
Yeah, so part of that working with the communities is not only just understanding what their needs are, what the barriers are, but also what the resources are, because the communities often come with a lot of potential for resource that really allows this stuff to move forward. So some of the things are the Aboriginal sports circles, the friendship centers, the different school systems all have resources. I think it's really important though that that we not use things like these other organizations as what I think of as surrogate organizations to the communities. That I think it's important that you still contact the communities and talk to the communities, and not just talk to the school principal, because if we're going to set up programs that are going to be lasting, it needs to be a co-design, and it needs to be based on relationships, and not with the institution, but with the communities and the archers. So I think that's important. Greg, welcome back. You were bumped off too.
Yeah, I was concerned about that, especially with the smoke. I was just kind of peeking outside too at this time. We went through a real heavy, thick smoke coverage a few minutes ago, and I think that really affected the internet. But also at this time of the night, it tends to get a little heavy too. And so I'm at the mercy of satellite with my internet connection. Not I'd love to have fiber optic, but I don't think that's ever going to be happening here, or at least not even down my road. It might be about 10 years away with the speed at which some things are being developed here, even at Six Nations. Yeah, I think the little bit that I missed and the last little bit that I heard from Mitch, I think it all points in a direction of yes, there's going to be difference in engaging, but I think also there has to be a willingness to look back at the way that things have been done. And what I'm hearing tonight is definitely moving forward in a way that's a little bit different, for lack of better terms right now. It's the idea that, there are definitely alternative ways of approaching communities, of engaging communities. And, you know, like I said, I really appreciate Mitch's words. I appreciate Sheila's words about the idea that they're not always going to be, you know, there has to be structure for safety. There has to be the introduction, and this is how you're going to start. But it means, you know, let's get actively doing the activity, and then we can start fine tuning later. Where I think a lot of times a colonial practice in the education system, in instructional systems, in coaching systems is, you know, there's this structured pre-planned package that is very rigid, and that's how we're going to do things. And a lot of times it's been very authoritarian. Basketball is something that I spent a lot of time coaching, and there's a gentleman by the name of Chris Oliver, and I really enjoy, you know, Chris and I actually knew each other. We did our level 3 certification together, and Chris has some out of the box ways of approaching things as well, and he's becoming one of the most popular speakers on basketball coaching in the US because of the fact that he's bringing an alternative way of looking at things. And, you know, his real thing is, do we really need to have this step-by-step A to B to C to D process to learn how to play the game really well? And, you know, he speaks of the idea that, you know, what, you know, of a games approach, which is often used, you know, in some of the new strategic plans for coaching development, but rarely actually really utilized in actual practice. But what I'm hearing from Mitch and what I'm hearing from Sheila, you know, I think that's really what needs to be promoted. When we talk about meet the needs of the community, that's what is needed. You know, honestly, I think, you know, it definitely is needed in Indigenous communities, but it's also needed for all coaching in all communities right now, because it has become so very, very structured. Especially, you know, I work and deliver NCCP courses, and, you know, there's merit to having that coaching instruction. But I also think that at times, you know, in terms of fiscal responsibility and possibly even just the idea of making it what's considered standardized, that we've kind of, there's been a movement away from the idea of, you really got to get hooked in trying and doing the activity first, and then you can fine tune to what's level that you would really like to then continue your participation in. And I think what happens, and this is one of the reasons I was talking about the questions or asking the questions of Mitch specifically, was the idea that I'm hearing an approach, I think that is what, in my mind, a good approach, and a better approach than having something that's so structured that it turns people away rather than encourages them to continue coming. And, you know, I think that's really what the crux of our message was, you know, that when we looked at creating this evening's discussion, it's that idea that we need to think in new ways, and we need to get the feedback from the people we're going to hopefully work with.
And I think, Greg, it also speaks to respect for the athletes, respect for them as people, as learners, and you know, giving them agency over what they learn and how they learn it. We're facilitators. We're not we're not there to impose you know, a fixed agenda on them. Respect.
Absolutely. And I think that, again, that's a key takeaway, but I also think that the people on the call tonight are already living that aspect of our message. So I'm really encouraged by that, because, again, that's something that I've been promoting for quite some time. There's a blog piece on Sport for Life's blogs. It's called 4 Questions with Me. And it was just recently reposted by the author of it. And I looked it over and I said, yeah, I guess, you know, I was thinking that way a few years ago when I actually did that piece. But one of the key things, again, is what I've mentioned tonight, is the idea that you know, being a secondary school teacher for 32 years, you know, I firsthand saw the system wanting to be mega structured, the system wanting to be, this is the one size fits all, when in reality, you know, you need to, you know, there's always a lot of talk about, you know, there's different learning styles, and as a teacher, you have to make sure that you're flexible and adaptable. But again, in actual practice, is that happening? And I think that's a key. Like once you are engaging with the communities, then the next thing is, are you retaining them in the communities? And I think that's a key to retaining and having even more people come out, because they're saying, hey, I get to play, rather than, oh, I went to that activity and all we did was just do this very structured practice. And I said, I think that's Chris Oliver's message as well. And I'm starting to hear it in a few places. Still not as many as you'd like to hear. And there's still a lot more older school instruction and leading going on out there. And I think that's part of what we'd like to see change for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree. So you know, some of the things that we wanted people to think about coming out of this session was what's up here on the screen. How can we connect with Indigenous communities? What are the ways that clubs and Indigenous communities can collaborate on programming, that co-creation? Is there anything that anything in our club that needs to be changed in order to welcome Indigenous athletes? And what's the first step that we can take towards welcoming those athletes? And I think the group here is well on its way to you know, understanding in their context how to do that. But I think it's important for all you know, all clubs interested in engaging with Indigenous athletes to think about that. And the other thing that we wanted from this session is we wanted some action, not just sit around for an hour and a bit and talk about concepts, but an answer to this question that's up there now. What will we commit to doing as our first step in welcoming Indigenous athletes? What are we going to commit to do, to start, or to continue to do that's important from this? And Zoe, where's the whiteboard?
Yep, I'm just going to put it in the chat right now. Everyone can click the link. I'm actually going to, if it's okay with everyone, I'll just stop sharing because I've got the question on the Jamboard, so everyone will be able to see it anyway.
Good.
And that way we can kind of everyone can see and reflect on what they see as well.
Yeah. So this is just an opportunity for you to, you know, think over the, you know, some of the discussion that we've just had, and what resonates with you. What is there here that you might do a little differently, that you might start doing, or that just seems like, you know, you're doing the right thing and you want to make sure that you don't lose that. So I would invite.
If you've never used a Jamboard before, sorry, I probably should have done this a little. The simplest way is just to click the sticky note button on the left-hand side, and you can basically type something in, and it will pop up as a sticky, just in case you've never used it. That's sorry to interrupt, Greg. Keep going. I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of how to use it.
That's good, and you'll see it looks like it's anonymous. So just give us some idea what your thoughts are. Okay, well, that's looking popular. Okay, so
everybody's processing right now. Everybody's processing right now, and maybe
okay, we'll
typing with like me.
give them a couple of minutes, but we really want to thank you for calling in tonight and participating. And you know, we hope there was something in the discussion for you that made it worthwhile.
I just want to say one thing is, up here in the Yukon, it's so hard to tell who is Indigenous and who's not. because every time they would ask me, do you have any Indigenous kids in your class? I'm like, I don't know, they all look the same to me. But in Ontario, because you're doing it on the reserve, that 99% of those kids are Indigenous. So it just, in Ontario, it's easier, but up here, it's not so easy to tell who's who.
Yeah, in my Indigenous club, I had some kids come that were looking very Chinese, had Chinese names and spoke Chinese. And I never asked a question. They want to come and shoot with us in an Indigenous club. They are more than welcome. They didn't take anything away from anyone.
I also think it speaks to the idea that in one of the statistics, I don't know how completely accurate it is that Indigenous people are not living on territories, old terminology, reservations, reserves, as much. Again, the territories are unique situations in that there are not reserves and territories, but also that, when we talk about a specific approach, that approach is for all people. If we talk about welcoming Indigenous people, though, it speaks to the idea that we do need to do things a little different from past colonial practices. But in general, that's going to end up probably being a really good approach for all people. So I think there's a little bit of both in there, and that's really something that I promote in a lot of my chats is just going back and analyzing. We've already mentioned it a couple times tonight. Going back and analyzing and saying, okay, what could I do to do things better? It's really not. Some people would go back and say, okay, well, you want me to go back and see what I did wrong? No, we'd rather have you. It should be a continuous process anyway of analyzing and saying, okay, how did that go, and then what can I maybe tweak to do things better? Because actually that's what we're always trying to do. We're always trying to do things a little better. As a coach, I know, as a teacher, I'm always looking, as a facilitator, I'm always looking for my next one to be a little better. And so I think that's the other approach, I think that is a little bit unique and is needed in Indigenous communities, because of the fact that up until now, there has been always then this one system that has been brought in, and that it doesn't change. It doesn't necessarily always self-analyze itself to say, okay, what can we tweak to make it a little better? What can we do to kind of get some feedback so that we can make some of those changes that will speak to the diversity that exists in the country, and then also the diversity that exists within Indigenous people, because we've got twice the diversity in the world just in Canada alone. 634 First Nation communities, basically 634 countries within Canada itself, 585, I think it is roughly, in the US. We're talking about over 1,300 countries, 1,100 countries, sorry, in North America, in Canada, US, if you look at it from the historical perspective of how each of those communities viewed themselves. So you've got an incredible amount of diversity. And so then there absolutely has to be adaptability and flexibility in the approach.
Yeah. And I think what we're talking about here is bringing the humanity back into the process and stop serving the machine. And I think that applies for everyone. I think it's what we're all looking for. We're just doing it under the name of Indigenous communities, but it applies very, very broadly.
I'd like to.
Kurt, do we want to just go ahead?
I was just going to say that I really enjoyed this conversation. Mitch, what you were saying about how you started up your club for something so just specific and for like a small group of people, just as a bit of inclusion and mental health. Like I've thought about starting our own club on our nation for a while, and I get kind of wound up in all the competition out there, like, okay, I have to compete with Jimbo's and all the big archery shops and their ranges and everything like that. And this conversation made me realize that it doesn't have to be that way, that we can get that involvement from, you know, just starting off with a couple of athletes and having it grow in certain communities. So I just wanted to, yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for having it and for those words.
And I think you can do it better because you are tailoring to the community.
Mhm,
Yeah, I was
exactly.
wondering what go through all the participants, you know, like, I mean, Melissa, you just kind of summarized a takeaway for you. Maybe we could just go through the list real quick if anybody has you know, a thought on tonight's session. Normally at the end of a course, we'll call it a popcorn session where a couple of words, a couple of sentences about your thoughts on the evening, and maybe we can just go from there. So again, we'll roll back to Sheila. Thoughts on tonight?
Yeah, it was interesting because it's like the way I think and do things. It's like, am I the only one that does it like this? But obviously, we all do it like this because that's how it makes sense to us to do it, as opposed to the colonial way. So it was just nice to see and hear that I'm not alone.
Awesome. Mitch?
I think this is great, being able to connect and network with a lot of Indigenous coaches and either previous or current athletes, and just to kind of talk about on how to build archery within our communities and what we can do to let it grow. And you know, I feel that during this time we all kind of fed off each other, and you know, like Sheila mentioned, that you know, she now knows that she's not the only one that runs her program the same. The way she runs her program, other people are doing that, and just kind of hearing that from other people, you know, allows you to give you that realization of that, you know, if other people are doing it, then it's being done. I don't want to say correctly, but it's going down the right path, and just kind of sharing all of our stories and allowing us to all hear each other. And that's something that I want to thank everybody who took the time to listen to my story, and also thank you for listening to other people's stories who are part of this webinar. And yeah, it's just really fantastic just to see all these Indigenous people really get together and figure out ways to get archery into their communities and have it grow.
Awesome. And Zoe, did we lose Kelly at some point?
Yeah, I think unfortunately we lost her around the same time that we lost you. But
Oh.
she is like close to you geographically, so I wonder if she had the same, if she had
Yeah,
issues
it
with
could have been.
smoke.
Like I said, like I've
Yeah,
got my phone, my laptop, and my desktop, and they all went out. They all went dead. It wasn't just one
oh
of
no.
them. So I actually turned off the Wi-Fi on there, and it still didn't. I went and rebooted my Wi-Fi signal. So I think there was something in the atmosphere for sure. So again, we're getting hit
Yeah,
pretty hard right now with the ash fallout. But
no,
yeah, definitely.
I did shoot her an email when she jumped off, just in case you know, if I could help, but she hasn't responded, so I'm guessing internet is an issue. Um, but Sheila, if is just asking about if they could get a present, if we can share a copy of the presentation and the audio. Greg and Kurt, I don't know if you guys have an issue with sharing the slides, at the very least.
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
Absolutely.
And we've
So just
missed one person for feedback.
did we get Melissa?
No, I was the first to go.
Yeah, she was the first to go.
Yeah.
Maybe we get feedback from Zoe. No.
Yeah, there we go.
I feel like I need to reflect on like the 6 months that we've been working on this to appropriately reflect everything that I've learned. But I do want to take the time to thank Kurt and Greg. They've put in many hours to this. And I think sharing knowledge on an incredibly important topic and something to think about. I am just conscious of time. We're at 8:25 Eastern. So I don't know if Greg and Kurt, if you guys have any closing comments that you'd like to make. I'll leave it open, but if not, we could end. So I'll leave it to either of you if you have thoughts.
Yeah, I'd just like to quickly reiterate again Mitch's words of just what he mentioned in his summary too, is that in Indigenous languages there really isn't an equivalent for right and or correct. It's good, and then good leaves the door open for tweaks and changes and adaptations to do better. And if I've learned one thing, I've learned that in being able to be so fortunate to have crisscrossed and gone through the country from coast to coast to coast up into the north as well. And that's a common theme with language. Like here at Six Nations, there has been a word developed for what's the equivalent of right, I guess, because again, they put it in our lexicography, but in reality, there was never really one. And so we really don't use it. It's the idea of good. And it's very similar to some other things too. And so I think, that kind of, again, just shows the little nuance that is needed when you're working with Indigenous communities. When you're working with Indigenous people, there are nuances that, again, we did things differently. We do a lot of things the same as people, but that's another example of that. There needs to be a small tweak in the system, and it can be for better. It can be for good. It doesn't mean that you have to throw everything that you believed in away when we're talking to mainstream or to colonial systems. But there does need to be that self-analysis that I mentioned previously. So having said that, Nyawagoa, thank you with great respect for everyone for sharing their minds and hearts. And from my perspective, as I mentioned before, we never say goodbye. We're always connected and always will be now. We see each other. If we don't see each other in person, we'll see each other in the spirit world. So Onagawahe is the apt way of saying until we see each other again. So Onagawahe, everyone. And once again, Nyawagoa. And I'll turn it over to Kurt.
And I just like to thank everyone for joining in the discussion, because this really was intended and I think turned out to be a valuable discussion, not a lecture, not a talking to, but a talking with. And I think that's very much our message here. So thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. As Greg says, until we meet again, until we see you again.
Amapi, miigwech.
Bye. Muktas.